I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and this is Mail Call Mondays, the show that answers your questions about precision rifles, optics, and equipment. Welcome to another Mail Call Mondays, and the rifle sitting in front of me right off the bat, we'll talk about it. This is my Armalite AR10. This is my designated marksman rifle that I use for work, and you guys will notice we've had a couple of changes here. It used to sport a 21-inch Noveske barrel, which was a very heavy barrel. The barrel performed adequately. It's never been a razor's edge accurate barrel, but it was more than adequate for law enforcement sniping / designated marksman work. Since it was long and since it was heavy, it actually caused quite a bit of issues. Number one being the fit of the rifle in the trunk of my Dodge Charger police car. Secondly, if the need to suddenly go a little bit closer into the target arose, a 21-inch barrel can cause some issues. Plus, running into situations where you have to stay in a rather sketchy support position for a while. Having all that weight hanging out front can be pretty fatiguing. So we decided to go back with a little shorter, little lighter weight barrel, and Faxon Firearms sent us out one of their 16-inch lightweight barrels. So we got this guy stuck on here. It fits really nicely underneath the SLR Rifleworks. This is one of their solo light 15-inch rails, and it is a M-LOK compatible rail. And we stuck on SLR Rifleworks brake, and this is one of their new brake / comp combos, and we're really interested to see how well it performed. We've got a SLR Rifleworks Sentry adjustable gas block in here, so we can get the whole system dialed in. Now, I really wish I had a range report for you guys on it, but we took it out this weekend and shot it. And we're in the process of getting the scope zeroed in and getting the rifle dialed in, and I had a little bit of a failure, and it was pretty curious. And those of you guys that were watching our Facebook posts saw me post some pictures and talk about it a little bit. The first thing that happened when I was shooting is I noticed that we were getting some really weird ejection. Sometimes the case would kick out. Sometimes it wouldn't. Sometimes I get a double feed. I get a failure to extract, and then it would try to launch the next cartridge in right on the back of the fired case. So I kind of thought that maybe that was a little bit of a gas issue, but usually if you have a gas issue, it'll try to extract the case. Sometimes it'll drop it in the receiver and then try to chamber another one, but usually that's not the case. So fiddled around with the gas system a little bit because that was the easiest resolution, and continued to shoot it and try to get the gas system dialed in, and then all of a sudden the trigger locked up, and it just would not fire at all. Even with the rifle off safe, when you put the selector on fire, it still felt like the trigger was on safe. Well, this is normally an issue if you have a primer or debris that falls down and gets underneath the tail of the trigger and causes some issues, and it's not able to rise, or it gets under the front of the trigger and doesn't allow the front of the trigger to drop. We've got an Armalite 2-stage trigger in here, so it was no big deal to bust open the receiver. I carry a mutt tool with me at the range, the Leatherman mutt tool that we've reviewed before, and that allowed me to punch the pins out really quickly, get in there and see what's going on. And I found a piece of a metal pin back in the receiver, and this confused me a little bit because it didn't look like any part of the trigger components, and I'm intimately familiar with them. I looked at both my fire control pins, and nothing had sheared off of them because it was approximately the diameter of a fire control pin. Nothing there, nothing on the selector. It didn't look like it was a detent from anywhere. It was just really kind of curious, and I put everything back together and went to fire another round, and the same thing. Well, at that point, I decided, all right, it's time to totally field strip the bolt and take a look at the bolt. I initially thought that the pin looked like it might have been the ejector on the bolt, and that would kind of start to explain some of the strange extraction and ejection issues. But it wasn't. When I grabbed the bolt, I noticed that the ejector was still in the bolt. So then we went ahead and field stripped the entire bolt, and when I did, when I pulled the extractor off, I had just a little stub of a pin still in the extractor. So that pretty much told me exactly where that had come from. It had come from the extractor pin. When I took the bolt apart and looked at the bolt, I've got just a little ding right here on the edge of the bolt. So it looks like what might have happened is the ejector pin has gotten worn down and it slid just enough out of the bolt that when the bolt's in the fully extended position, that it came down, and then when the bolt slammed forward, it hit that pin and maybe fractured the pin. And then through repeated cycles, I think the outside portion of the pin just fell out into the receiver, and then we ended up with the situation that we ended up with. Very strange. I've never had that happen in any ARs, large frame or small frame, before. Usually the extractor pin is not a failure point. It was just a really odd malfunction. Had I had a complete parts repair kit with me, would have been really quick to get that back up and running. But since I actually didn't, in fact I didn't have the armorer's box with me at all, it took me a little while. Now I do carry, because the majority of the rifles that we have here, the large frame ARs, are DPMS spec. I've got a DPMS field replacement parts kit that has an extractor pin in it. But the interesting thing when we measure these is the Armalite pin is 5 thousandths larger than the DPMS pin. And since this issue seems to have occurred because the pin started sliding out, I don't really want to use the DPMS pin in the Armalite bolt. I think we could run into the same issue and possibly cause some more damage to the carrier. Now, the reason I'm talking about all this, first of all, is to let you guys know that even if you don't think that you may ever have to replace a part, the field parts replacement kit is just really cheap insurance. When you're talking about a rifle that costs a couple $1,000s, $60 parts kit in your bag can save you some issues. I don't go to the extent of carrying a full replacement bolt, because I figure at that point, if the bolt has fractured, I'm pretty much going to end my shooting day. These are precision rifles, so the bolts are matched to the barrels. I do that during assembly. Now, you could go to the extent of taking your bolt and checking headspace on the spare bolt with the spare rifle and put all that aside. You could even go to the extent of test firing and making sure the zero is confirmed between the spare bolt and the live bolt, if you want to go to that extent. For most of what I'm doing, if I lose a bolt, if I fracture a bolt in a semi-auto rifle, then I'm just going to put the rifle up and I'm going to enjoy watching and taking pictures for the rest of the match. It's not that big of a deal to me. In a live situation, a law enforcement situation, I'm probably not going to carry a spare bolt either, because those situations move so fluidly and they're so fast that by the time that you would be able to disassemble your weapon, replace the bolt, put it back together, the situation is going to be resolved one way or the other. So being able to just go to a secondary weapon system is a much better option than carrying spare parts. But if you have to go a long distance to get to your range to enjoy your shooting days, then it may be a really good option. It's nice to be able to fix stuff at the range. And usually I'm able to do that without my armorer's box. In this situation, it wasn't. So the nice thing is Armalite, we sent them an email through their contact system this weekend, and this is Monday morning right now, and we got an email back from them saying they were going to send out a replacement part, even though they're not responsible for parts in home-built rifles, which is a great position on their part. Again, we're talking about a pin that, probably costs a couple of cents to manufacture. It's a couple of bucks if you buy it through their online system or through Brownells or any of the other places. So not a massive deal. I'm not asking them to replace a whole bolt carrier assembly or something like that. But I'm glad that they stepped up. This rifle is pretty much all Armalite parts with the exception of the barrel nut forward. All the internal components to the receivers are Armalite parts. It's Armalite spring, Armalite buffer. So I'm really happy that they stepped up and took care of me on that. Just know that you may not have the same response depending upon how you present it to them. But that's our story on that. Now, as soon as we get that replacement pin in and we get this together, we're going to give you guys a little bit of a review on the Faxon Firearms 16-inch lightweight barrel. They sent us 2 barrels. They sent us a medium weight fluted 18, and they sent us the lightweight 16. We went with the lightweight 16 first. There's about a 5-ounce difference between the 2 barrels. Went with the lightweight 16 because I'm really curious to see how this barrel will perform when we get it hot. Now, for real world scenarios, in a law enforcement situation, I'm not going to fire enough rounds through this rifle really to heat that barrel up and have the point of impact change. That's not a concern. In a law enforcement situation, 1 or 2 shots is typically going to be all that would be fired in a real world situation. So I wanted to go this route just for curiosity's sake, and because occasionally this rifle may get used for a 308 limited match or a law enforcement match, depending upon what the format is and what the course of fire is. And as I've started to progress in my shooting, I've really started to like the benefit of lighter weight rifles instead of just these great big huge heavy rifles. Obviously we have heavy rifles. Our Accuracy International with the 243 barrel on it is a hoss of a rifle, but if I can go lighter weight and still get the job done, that's good to go. So far, the 15 rounds that we fired through this rifle before we broke the bolt, the SLR Rifleworks brake has worked great. Really a nice component. I got a little bit of concussion off of it because we're shooting between concrete shooting benches, but I set my light back here far enough and it's not really carboning up the front of the light. The Surefire is still totally usable, so that's kind of nice to see. We haven't shot it at night yet, so I don't know how well the flash suppressing part of it is going to work. My belief is it's probably going to throw a pretty good flash still, especially on a 16-inch 308. But the main thing I was worried about is getting that recoil reduction down a little bit so I can spot shots, and that it absolutely did. Just with a bipod and a rear bag, I had no problems at maximum magnification with staying on target through recoil. So far, that brake has worked really well. Well, that's about it about this rifle. If you guys have any questions or comments about the bolt pin breakage or about the rifle itself, please leave it down in the comment section below. Let's go ahead and get on with our questions though. And our first question is from Troy, and Troy asks, what are some worthy budget scopes, maybe in the ballpark of $250? Well, Troy, the budget scope that I recommend the most in the $250 range is this guy right here. This is a Bushnell Elite Tactical 3200. Now this scope is a fixed 10 power. It has fixed parallax adjustment. It has adjustable ocular and mill turrets. It has a basic mil dot reticle, and that's about it. This is an excellent beginner's / learning scope because there's not a lot to confuse you on here. It works very well. It's a rugged scope, and they hold their value decently well. So when you go to get rid of the scope later on, then you shouldn't have a problem. You're not going to get hurt really badly on it. You could sell it for half of what you bought it for, and that's still not the hit that you would take if you bought a $2,000, $3,000 scope and then try to sell it used after it's been on a rifle and has ring marks and all that stuff. The really nice thing though is for $250 you're getting a scope that you're going to be able to use for a lifetime and not really have to worry about anything. There's not a lot to it, there's not a lot to go wrong, and so you can get to the range and you can worry about learning the fundamentals and not worrying about if your equipment is going to work well. Now this scope is a Midway exclusive. We're not endorsed by Midway. We don't advertise for Midway, but unfortunately that is the only place that you can get this scope with the mill reticle and mill turrets. There are a number of other places that sell the Bushnell Elite Tactical 3200, but it usually comes with a mill reticle and MOA turrets. So we don't recommend that. We recommend the mill version. Another good option is the SWFA SS 10 power. Their standard fixed 10 power scope is also a mill reticle and mill turrets. I think the Bushnell turrets are a little bit better quality. I really like the clicks and the feel of the Bushnell turrets versus the SWFA 10 power turrets. Their clicks are a little bit less distinct. But you get a better reticle in that scope. That scope has a mill quad reticle, which instead of having mill dots, you have diamonds, and the mills are subdivided at the 0.5 mil mark with a hash mark. So it's a little bit finer reticle than the standard mill dot reticle. You're still limited to 10 power, which for positional shooting, for anything except group shooting or dot shooting, 10 power is going to be sufficient. A lot of moving target stages, I'm on 10 power or sometimes even less. Shooting from barricades, shooting a variety of targets, even out to some extended distances. I may have my scope down around 10 power, 12 power, because that just gives me a better field of view. It gives me a better sight picture. So don't think that the 10 power all of a sudden limits you and you won't be able to do stuff with it. You can still do a lot of training with a 10 power scope. Again, you just may be slightly limited when you're shooting groups, depending upon the type of target you decide to use. But sometimes life is a little bit more than getting out and just shooting groups. Now, in the comments on our Facebook page, when you asked this question, some guys were recommending a lot of other scopes out there. There are some variable power scopes that are close to that price range that may work okay, but the problem is the reliability on those scopes is a mixed bag. This scope is tried and true. The SWFA SS10X is also another one that's tried and true. Those scopes are tanks. They work really well. One slight drawback to this one is it is a 1-inch turret, or I'm sorry, a 1-inch main tube. It's a little bit smaller than most of the other scopes out there. The standard is pretty much 30 millimeter and now 34 millimeter. So if you set this scope up on your rifle, just know at some point later on, you're probably going to have to upgrade your rings when you get time to upgrade the scope. The benefit with going with the $250 10X scope is then that I think really is the lower level of where you're going to get acceptable quality, acceptable repeatability, and then you can save your money beyond that to get the fancy whiz-bang scopes. So this is a good starting point, and then save your money beyond that. This will do pretty much everything you need to do for training and developing as a shooter until you get up into the price range where you can get the extra features, the nice variable first focal plane scopes, and go from there. So I hope that answers your question on that. Our next question comes from Chris, and Chris says, what's the biggest accuracy improvement that can be made for an AR10 aside from trigger replacement? Love my guy sleeve trigger on my 450 Bushmaster and saw a DPMS 308 that looks good. Gotta love shade tree gunsmithing. Well, Chris, the trigger is not necessarily an accuracy improving point. What the trigger does is the trigger allows you to better interface with the rifle. So the intrinsic accuracy of the rifle is not changed based on what trigger you put in it. If you were able to lock it into a machine rest and have a robot pull the trigger, the robot's not going to care if the trigger is an 8-pound gritty trigger or a 8-ounce match trigger. So the trigger really isn't an accuracy thing, but it does affect how you interact with the rifle, and that will affect the end accuracy of the complete system because we're not locking these into a rest. We're shooting them as human beings. The biggest accuracy point on these rifles, once you get past a free-floating handguard, is the barrel and the bolt. The ability of the barrel and the bolt to come together the same way each and every time, and that barrel's ability to maintain its alignment with your sighting system is what gives you the accuracy of the system. So a high quality barrel and a matched bolt is really the next step that you need to go to if your forend is already free floating. That will give you the most accuracy out of the system. You can really take just about any of the rifles out there, and if you have a high quality barrel and a matched bolt, then you're going to improve the accuracy system of that rifle. One benefit of rebarreling one of these rifles is once you have some basic hand tools, you order the barrel, and when the barrel arrives to you, there's no more machining to be done. You're going to bolt it in, you're going to put the gas system on, put the handguard back on, and you're ready to roll. It pretty much just takes some torque wrenches, an armorer's wrench, and a block to hold the action in. And if you want to know exactly what it takes to rebarrel one of these rifles, go ahead and make sure you check out our MA 10 series, both our 308 and our 6.5 Creedmoor, and we go through installing the barrels on those. Our next question comes from Tim, and Tim asks, what would you consider an acceptable level of a trigger job done by a non-gunsmith? Specifically, would you recommend keeping it to just polishing or tackling a true trigger job by using stones? I'm guessing drop-in kits is within most people's capability. Well, Tim, as I asked on our Facebook page, I asked a clarifying question, and Tim's mainly referring to handguns, because I would never recommend a layman open up a Remington trigger and try to improve upon what the factory has done in there. Turning the screws on one of those triggers will give you a very, very good trigger pull. If you want to go beyond that, you can replace some springs in it, but I would not suggest taking any stones to the inside of a Remington trigger unless you really know what's going on. When we're talking about ARs, I've seen a lot of good AR triggers goofed up by users with stones that didn't really know what they were doing. You have very, very precise angles that you have to keep. You change those angles just a little bit and you turn a trigger that had a decent break into something that's really creepy, really gritty, and can be unsafe. So be very careful of what you're doing. I'm not saying that you shouldn't go out and play around with those triggers, but just be prepared to throw that trigger in the garbage and replace it with something else. Don't push the limits. If it is a duty gun or a work gun or a defensive gun, unless you know what you're doing, leave the trigger alone. You can run into some serious issues with unsafe triggers if you do that. As far as triggers for handguns like 1911s, Glocks, Smith & Wesson, drop-in triggers are good to go. Most of them out there are on the conservative side. We've had great experience with the Vogel competition trigger from glocktriggers.com. They sent us out one to put in our Glock. We did the trigger install video that's floating around somewhere on our YouTube page, and it worked great. It's still to a point that I would feel comfortable carrying that trigger. Even though it is a competition trigger, I would feel comfortable utilizing that as a defensive firearm. They put a lot of work into polishing the components and selecting the components to work together. Now, Glock triggers are very, very simple. So polishing up connectors, dropping things in, that is perfectly within the realm of your average home gun tinkerer. I am not what I would consider a gunsmith, and I'm more than capable of replacing Glock components. Of course, I am a Glock certified armor, and I will tell you off the bat that Glock does not recommend you replace any Glock components with non-Glock components or modified Glock components. But it's fairly simple and fairly easy to do. As long as the firearm passes safety checks when you're done, I think you're going to be okay. Again, when you start talking about stones and files and changing engagement angles, that's when you have to be very careful that you're not defeating the safety systems that the firearm came with. So drop-in triggers, good to go, especially drop-in triggers on the AR, drop-in triggers on bolt guns. But when you start changing the geometry of that trigger, changing internal spring weights or things like that, really make sure you know what you're doing. Make sure it is not a critical use weapon. Make sure it's something that if the thing is down or the thing isn't working, or you take it to the range and it fails its tests, that it's something you can shelve or that you can throw those components away, that it's not something that you have to go to work the next day with that gun. Our next question comes from Gary, and Gary is the match director for the Guardian Long Range matches, and he asks, what are some of your favorite stages and scenarios? Which ones do you dread? Well, my favorite scenarios are really going to depend upon what firearm I'm shooting, what platform I'm shooting, and really how I'm feeling on that certain day. One of my favorite stages at the Guardian match was the one where we were running from barrel to barrel and engaging targets downrange. And one of the reasons that was my favorite is because I was running the 6.5 Creedmoor Ma-10, which is a very fast, very accurate rifle. So moving from point to point and engaging targets very quickly is a ton of fun. I usually like vehicle stages where you have to shoot from some cramped up position inside the vehicle because that causes you to be creative and it is applicable to my job. So it forces me to be creative in a situation that may help me later on. When I am shooting a bolt gun, really I like long range cold bore stages. I think that is the absolute peak performance for a bolt gun, as when you can make a long range hit for the first shot of the day without any sighters, without any adjustment, without any zero confirmation. Just pull the gun out of the bag, lock and load, and send the first round and make an impact. So long range cold bores, I really like those. I find long range cold bore to be a better test of the gun and the shooter versus the short range cold bore test that you'll often see at 100 or 200 on paper. 100 or 200 on paper is a test of the firearm's repeatability and of the shooter's ability to execute the firing tasks, but the long range cold bore brings everything together, and it requires the shooter's ability to interpret the atmosphere, see what the wind's doing and everything for the first shot of the day. So again, I really like the long range cold bore shots. I didn't say I'm the greatest at them, but I like those because when you actually do connect, you really feel like you accomplished something on that stage, and it is an easy stage to shoot because you're usually only firing 1 or 2 shots from one firing point on one target. So the logistics of it are very simple to set up. So that's about it. Those of you guys that do shoot competition, though, I really want to hear what you guys think. What are your favorite stages? How do you like to shoot? So go ahead and leave that down below in our comments, and we'll forward Gary down to check out those as well. Our next question comes from Tim, and Tim asks, what Black Friday items, gun or gear related of course, are you on your list to get? Well, Tim, I don't really do the whole Black Friday thing. In fact, I absolutely despise Black Friday because I am usually on my way to work and I have to deal with all the shopping center traffic, because unfortunately where I live right now is right in the center of one of our shopping areas. So I have to actually take the back way and hit the bypass to try to get to work anytime that we are in our peak shopping season. I hate crowds. I don't like being stuffed in stores with people, so I don't do the Black Friday thing. I generally also try to avoid those impulse shopping times. If I am on a computer and I see a good deal at one of the online stores that I deal with routinely, then I may go ahead and purchase it, but there's nothing I'm specifically out there looking for those Black Friday sales. I think there is a lot of hype, a lot of things that they're trying to suck consumers in with the emotional frenzy, and I just don't want to give into it. So nothing really on the Black Friday shopping list for me. I'll wait a couple of weeks afterwards, and then I'll check out deals on things that I need. But we're pretty well set here with ammo, gear, equipment, etc. So nothing's really giving me a great burning desire. Now, after we get back from SHOT Show and we see all the new stuff, that's when the burning desire to get gear and guns starts to hit me, when I get to play with all the new stuff and then come back and try to see what it is that I can afford. And our last question is from Jose, and he asks, how's the SLR brake working for you? And Jose, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, so far it's working pretty well. It works real well at recoil reduction on this system right here. I just am waiting to get a chance to get out and shoot it at night, and we'll see how bad the flash is with it. And I would really like to put more than 15 rounds through it before we come to our ultimate conclusion. But we will be doing a review on the brake whenever we get that completed. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And that's all we have for this Mail Call Mondays. I hope you guys have enjoyed the show. If so, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. If you have any questions or comments on anything that we discussed during the show, go ahead and leave them in the comments section below or send them to us on Facebook or Twitter. And until next time, get out and shoot!